The mop hit the floor before the scalpel did. That's the thing no one tells you about hiding. Sometimes the very thing you're running from finds you in the most ordinary places. Maya Chun had spent 3 years perfecting the art of invisibility. A gray uniform, calloused hands, eyes that never held yours too long. She moved through St. Meridian General Hospital the way water moves through pipes, invisibly, purposefully, and only noticed when something went wrong. She'd saved 2 lives in the supply closet on the 3rd floor, one in the parking garage, once, memorably, in the elevator between the 4th and 5th floors while holding a mop and wearing rubber gloves. Nobody knew. Nobody was supposed to. But on the night of October 14th, when the hospital's most celebrated surgeon stood over a dying man and got it catastrophically, irreversibly wrong, Maya Chun set down her mop. And everything she'd been hiding from came looking for her. The thing about hospital janitors is that everyone looks through them. Maya Chun had counted on that. She had, in fact, designed her entire existence around it. It was 6:42 in the morning when she pushed her cart through the sliding doors of St. Meridian General's east entrance. The security guard, a heavy-set man named Dave who smelled of coffee and regret, didn't look up from his phone. The receptionist at the front desk, 23-year-old Brittany, who wanted to be an influencer and was furious about her current life situation, didn't look up from her mirror. 2 nurses walking fast in the opposite direction swerved around Maya's cart the way people swerve around a pothole, automatically, without acknowledgement. Maya noted all of this, filed it, moved on. Her real name, her full name, the one attached to a security clearance level that most government officials would never even be told existed, was Dr. Maya Chun. Not just Dr. Maya Chun. Dr. Maya Chun, MD, PhD, former senior medical officer, Special Operations Command, Black Division. Former lead surgeon of Unit Echo 7, the covert rapid response team responsible for surgical operations in 17 classified conflicts across 4 continents over the past 6 years. Recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, the Intelligence Medal, and 2 commendations she was legally prohibited from discussing. She was 28 years old. She mopped the floor of Corridor B and thought about none of this. What she thought about was the subtle asymmetry in how Mrs. Patterson in room 412 was walking, slightly favoring her left side in a way that didn't match her stated hip injury, which meant her real pain source was probably L4, L5 disc compression that the attending physician had missed. She'd left an anonymous note in the suggestion box 3 days ago. Nobody had acted on it yet. She thought about the medication cart that had been left unlocked in the East Wing for the 2nd time this week, a security issue she'd also reported anonymously. She thought about the little girl in the pediatric ward, room 217. Lisa Nguyen, 9 years old, admitted 2 weeks ago with what had been diagnosed as a persistent viral infection but which Maya, passing by during her evening rounds with the mop, had recognized as early-stage Still's disease, a rare autoimmune condition that mimicked viral illness in its early presentation. She'd written that one up too, left it and signed. Nobody had looked twice at the paper folded into the suggestion box. The suggestion box was her only remaining outlet. It wasn't enough. It never was. But drawing attention to herself was not an option. Not yet. Not until she was sure they'd stopped looking. Maya had gone underground 18 months after an extraction mission in Eastern Europe had gone sideways in a way that left 3 of her unit's handlers dead and the identity of Unit Echo 7's medical officer exposed on 2 separate dark web intelligence forums. The people responsible for that leak were still out there. The people who wanted to collect on the price on her head were still out there. And so Maya Chun had done what she was trained to do. She had disappeared. A janitor at a mid-size hospital in the mid-size city of Riverton was about as invisible as a person could get while still maintaining access to medical supplies she might one day urgently need. She was good at her job. Actually good. Not in the way people are good at jobs they're overqualified for and secretly contemptuous of, but genuinely, specifically good. The floors she mopped stayed clean. The supply rooms she organized stayed organized. She noticed things, fraying power cords, improperly stored medications, the early signs of a Clostridium outbreak in the East Wing bathrooms that she'd flagged 2 weeks before the infection control team caught it. She asked for nothing. She said little. She smiled when people walked past her, and she was invisible, and she was safe, and she had gotten very good at telling herself that this was fine. It was fine. It was fine until the black convoy pulled into the hospital's front drive at 11:31 p.m. on the night of October 14th, and everything stopped being fine. The convoy was 3 black SUVs and a paramedic unit, which meant federal. The way the uniforms fell, the cut, the posture, the way 3 of them fanned out before the doors even opened, meant Secret Service. Maya, pushing her cart down the corridor that overlooked the front entrance, noted this the way she noted everything. Calmly, precisely, and with the part of her brain that never actually went off duty. Senator Robert Caldwell was wheeled in on a gurney at 11:34. 65. Overweight by about 40 pounds. Complexion that had gone the particular shade of gray that Maya associated with. Her eyes tracked to his hands, the way his fingers had curled, his lips, cardiac event. Possibly am I. She noted the way he was breathing. Short, effortful. Radiation of pain, probably extending to the jaw. Classic presentation, but there was something else. A subtle deviation that she filed automatically. The duration of symptoms per the paramedic's verbal report, which she wasn't supposed to be close enough to hear, but was. The specific location of his reported pain, the way his body was positioned on the gurney. This wasn't a standard MI. This was an aortic dissection with secondary cardiac involvement. 2 different diagnoses. 2 very different treatment protocols. The difference between them, in terms of patient outcome, was the difference between alive and dead. Director Harrison Blackwell was already in the lobby. At 55, Blackwell had the build of a man who had once been athletic and was now using the memory of that as an excuse to eat badly. He wore his authority like a coat that was slightly too big, always adjusting it. He had become director of St. Meridian General 11 years ago through a combination of political maneuvering, a golf friendship with the hospital board's chairman, and a near-pathological talent for taking credit for other people's work. He was, in Maya's private assessment, a dangerous man, not because he was cruel, though he was, but because he was incompetent and didn't know it. The most dangerous kind. Dr. Sterling. Blackwell's voice filled the lobby. Dr. Victoria Sterling to the ER, stat. VIP arrival. Senator Caldwell. DR. Victoria Sterling was 38, chief of surgery, and the kind of brilliant that had curdled slightly into arrogance over years of being told she was the best in the room. She was genuinely good. Maya had watched her operate once, through a window she wasn't supposed to be looking through, and had acknowledged her technical skill with the cold impartiality of a professional. But good wasn't perfect, and confident wasn't infallible. Sterling swept into the ER with the particular energy of someone who has been performing expertise for so long they've started to believe the performance was the thing itself. She reviewed the paramedic's report. She conducted her assessment. She conferred briefly with the attending physician, a tired-looking resident named Dr. James Park, who had been on hour 19 of a 24-hour shift and whose fatigue Maya had noted earlier in the evening with professional concern. Acute myocardial infarction, Sterling said. Crisp. Certain. The tone of a person who was not interested in second opinions. Prepare the cath lab. We're going to get ahead of this. Maya, who had followed the gurney at a distance of approximately 40 feet while pretending to be interested in the baseboards, heard this and felt something cold shift in her chest. They were going to anticoagulate him. Standard protocol for MI. If this was an aortic dissection, and Maya was as close to certain as she allowed herself to be without imaging, anticoagulation therapy would kill him within the hour. She stood very still for a moment, mop in hand, in the doorway of the corridor. Then she walked toward the ER. Dr. Sterling. Maya's voice was quiet. It had that quality that voices develop after years of delivering critical information in high-noise environments. A stillness that cut through ambient sound without rising above it. Sterling turned. Her eyes found Maya, processed what she was looking at, gray uniform, mop, rubber gloves, and produced the specific expression that people produce when they realize they've given attention to something that doesn't deserve it. This is a restricted area, Sterling said. I know. I'm mop it. Maya kept her voice even. I need to say something about your diagnosis. The pause that followed had a particular quality, the quality of something being compressed before it explodes. I'm sorry. His symptom presentation is atypical for standard MI. The pain radiation pattern per the paramedic's report, the duration, the way he was positioned. I think you should rule out aortic dissection before you anticoagulate. Silence. Then Director Blackwell, who had been standing at the nurse's station trying to look important to the senator's Secret Service detail, walked over with the particular arrangement of features on his face that preceded unpleasantness. "Who is this?" he said. "Janitor," said Sterling. "Corridor B." "I'm aware of what she's wearing," Blackwell said. "I'm asking who she thinks she is. I'm asking you to get a CT angiogram before you start anticoagulation therapy," Maya said. She looked at Dr. Park, who was standing just behind Sterling and whose eyes, she noticed, were sharp and alert in a way that suggested he was actually listening. "It takes 20 minutes. If I'm wrong, you lose 20 minutes. If I'm right." "If you're right," Sterling said, "then I'm wrong, which I'm not, which means you're wasting my time and endangering a patient by delaying treatment." She turned to Blackwell. "Can someone remove her?" "I've seen aortic dissections misread, as am I before," Maya said, and something in her voice made Dr. Park straighten up slightly. "The presentation." "You've seen aortic dissections," Sterling repeated. The contempt in her voice was exquisite in its precision. "You, the janitor." She looked at Maya the way you look at something you found on the bottom of your shoe. "What medical training does a janitor have, exactly?" Maya said nothing. "Right," said Sterling. "Remove her." Two security guards arrived with apologetic expressions. Maya appreciated the apology. She went without resistance, allowing them to steer her back toward the corridor. She stood in corridor B with her mop, checked her watch, waited. She'd done harder things than waiting. In the third year of her covert service, she'd once spent 14 hours motionless in a drainage canal in 40-degree water waiting for a medical emergency extraction window to open. She'd performed an emergency tracheotomy at the end of it with fingers that had lost most of their sensation. Waiting in a clean hospital corridor with full circulation in all extremities was, comparatively, easy. At 11:49 p.m., she heard the shift in the monitors through the closed ER doors. At 11:52, she heard voices elevating. At 11:58, the crash alarm went off. Maya was already moving before the second tone. She didn't run. Running was for people who needed time to think about what they were going to do. Maya walked fast, with the particular economy of motion that years of operating under fire had built into her muscle memory, and she was through the ER doors in 40 seconds. Senator Caldwell was in crisis. His systolic pressure had cratered. The monitors were screaming. Sterling was at the bedside, her composure fractured for the first time, shouting orders that were well executed and completely insufficient. Dr. Park was doing compressions. The room had that particular quality of organized chaos that Maya had lived inside for 6 years. Competent people doing competent things that were not going to be enough. Maya assessed in 2 seconds. The presentation had evolved exactly as she'd known it would. Dissection. The blood pressure differential between his arms, she could see it in the numbers on the monitor, 40 millimeters of mercury differential, was diagnostic. "Stop the heparin," she said. People looked at her. She was still wearing the gray uniform, still carrying traces of industrial cleaning solution on her hands. "Stop the heparin," she said again. "He's dissecting. You're going to lose him in 4 minutes if you don't stop the anticoagulation and get a surgical team in here." "Security," Blackwell started from the doorway. "Let her speak." Dr. Park's voice, tired but precise. He'd seen something in her the first time that the others hadn't. "His pressures are tanking. Whatever we're doing isn't working. Let her speak. She's a janitor." "I have eyes," Park said flatly. "Janitor or not. She called this 20 minutes ago. What do we have to lose?" Maya was already at the bedside. She'd shed the rubber gloves. "Someone." Emily Torres, one of the nurses, a small, quick woman with the competence of someone who'd been in emergency medicine long enough to stop being impressed by titles, handed her a fresh pair without being asked. Maya noted this with the quick, specific appreciation of someone who recognizes professional instinct in others. "I need the imaging up," Maya said. "And I need whatever surgical supplies are available. We may not be able to wait for a full or." The echocardiogram that Park had quietly ordered, without authorization, on instinct, 30 minutes earlier after Maya's first intervention, came up on the screen. Everyone in the room went quiet. The dissection was right there. Type A, ascending aorta. Exactly where Maya had said it would be. Sterling made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "How long has he been symptomatic?" Maya was already moving, already running the numbers, her mind doing the rapid calculation of time to intervention that she'd run in languages she didn't speak fluently. in rooms without electricity, in vehicles that were simultaneously trying to kill her. Since before the paramedics arrived, based on their report, we're looking at a 3 to 4 hour window. He needs surgery now, but his cardiac tamponade is going to kill him faster than the dissection if we don't decompress first. She looked at Emily. Pericardiocentesis. I need an 18-gauge needle, minimum length. Do we have an ultrasound guide available? Emily was already moving. You cannot be serious, Blackwell said from the doorway, his voice doing something strange, stretched thin between fury and fear, the specific sound of a man watching his power fail. You cannot be allowing this. She has no credentials. She has no credentials. She is a janitor. If she touches that patient, we're liable for. He's dying, Park said, without looking up. She could kill him. He's dying right now, Park said again. Harrison, he is dying. Right now? In front of us. While we argue about her uniform. The room went quiet except for the monitors. Maya accepted the needle from Emily. She positioned the ultrasound probe. Her hands did not shake. They never shook. She'd performed pericardiocentesis in the back of a moving vehicle at altitude in a sandstorm once. She'd done it by feel, in zero visibility, with one functional hand. A well-lit hospital ER with a functioning ultrasound machine and a competent nursing staff was, by her operational standards, luxurious. She talked through everything she was doing, not for the room, not for her own benefit, but for Dr. Park, who she'd read in approximately 40 seconds as someone worth teaching. Someone who absorbed information with his whole attention. He followed her words with his eyes, and she could see him understanding. She drained the pericardial effusion with the precision of someone who has done this enough times that the needle is an extension of intention rather than instrument. The monitor showed Caldwell's pressure beginning to recover. Not enough, not yet, but buying time. Enough time for the cardiac surgical team that Emily had summoned to reach the OR in prep. Enough time for the imaging to confirm what Maya had already known. Enough time for the man on the gurney to remain alive. 37 minutes after Maya had walked back through those ER doors, Senator Robert Caldwell had a heartbeat, a stabilizing blood pressure, and a surgical team ready to receive him for the repair that would save his life. Maya stepped back from the table. She stripped her gloves. She looked at Dr. Park, who was looking at her with an expression she didn't have time to interpret. You should go with him, she said. The surgical team is good, but they'll need to be briefed on the timeline of intervention. You have that information. Park nodded. He looked like he wanted to say something. He didn't. Maya picked up her mop from where she'd left it by the door. Nice work, everyone, she said quietly, and she meant it. Emily Torres had been extraordinary in the way that excellent nurses are always extraordinary. Park had held the room together with the quiet authority of someone who understood that titles are less important than results, and even the residents who'd shown up at the end had conducted themselves with professionalism. Really, you all did well. Then she turned to go back to Corridor B. Director Blackwell found his voice at approximately 12:41 a.m. By that point, Senator Caldwell was in the OR with the cardiac surgical team completing the repair, and his vitals were stable enough that the Secret Service agents who had been standing at the ER entrance with the particular posture of men prepared to intervene had visibly relaxed by approximately 3 degrees. Blackwell found his voice, and he pointed his finger at Maya Chun, who was leaning against the corridor wall outside the ER with the expression of someone waiting for a bus they've taken 1,000 times. That woman, he said, loudly, in the direction of the 2 security guards who had rematerialized at his elbow, practiced medicine without a license in my hospital. On a United States senator. His voice was climbing toward something operatic. She is a fraud. She has no credentials. She has no training. She could have killed that man. She could have. She saved him, Dr. Park said. He'd come back from the ER handoff. He was still in the same scrubs from a shift that had now technically lasted 22 hours, and there was a specific quality to his exhaustion that made his voice very clear and very unadorned. We don't know that. I watched her, Harrison. Park used the director's first name with the particular deliberateness of someone who is done performing deference. I was in that room for all 37 minutes. I watched every decision she made. She saved his life. She is a janitor, Blackwell said, with the emphasis of a man who has built his entire understanding of worth on visible markers of status. She mops floors. She has no medical degree. You don't know what she has, Park said quietly. I know what I can see, Blackwell snapped. He turned back to the security guards, who were looking at Maya with the expression of people being asked to do something they're not entirely sure about. Arrest her. Call the police. She will be charged with practicing medicine without a license, reckless endangerment, trespassing in a restricted medical area. You might want to reconsider that. Maya's voice was quiet. It had not changed quality since the first time she'd spoken tonight. Still that particular stillness. No anger, no fear, no performance of either. Not for my sake. For yours. Arrest her, Blackwell said. The security guard stepped forward. And then, from the direction of the main entrance, from beyond the glass doors, growing closer, there was a sound that made everyone in the corridor stop. Not the sound of the doors. Not footsteps. A sound that came before both of those. A single, sharp vocalization from an animal, followed immediately by absolute silence. The specific silence of a trained dog entering a space and assessing it. Then the doors opened. Captain Derek Wilson was 42 years old and built like something that had been through significant weather and emerged with improved structural integrity. He wore civilian clothes, dark jacket, plain shirt, but stood in them like a uniform, with the particular upright quality of someone whose body had stopped knowing how to be casual. His face had the stillness of someone who spent a great deal of time in situations where emotional expression was operationally inadvisable. There were lines in it that had been put there by specific events, the way lines are put in wood by specific forces, and they told a story in a language most people in this corridor didn't speak. Beside him, on a leash, was a Belgian Malinois in a tactical vest. Rex was 4 years old. He had amber eyes and the compact, precise physicality of a dog who had been trained to the absolute limits of canine capability, and then trained some more. The markings on his tactical vest, Maya recognized them from the distance of 40 feet, in the corridor's fluorescent light, without any hesitation at all, belonged to a unit whose existence was not acknowledged in public documentation. Maya went very still. Rex's head came up. His nostrils flared. He pulled against the leash, not frantically, not with the chaotic energy of a dog who has lost composure, but with a focused, deliberate insistence that Wilson recognized and allowed, following as the dog moved through the small crowd of nurses, security guards, residents, and hospital staff who had gathered in the corridor with the quiet precision of a force navigating known terrain. He stopped in front of Maya. Rex sat. Then, and this was the moment that would stay with every person in that corridor for the rest of their lives, he lowered his head. Slowly, deliberately, his muzzle dropping toward the floor, the full weight of his attention shifting downward in a gesture that was nothing like a trick performed for an audience. In Unit Echo 7, it had started as a joke. Maya had been 24, 18 months into her service, fresh off a particularly brutal extraction in the Caucasus in which 3 team members had come back alive primarily because she'd refused to let them die. They'd been in the field debrief tent, Rex sitting beside her as he always did after operations, and she'd been tired and slightly overwhelmed, and she'd said to him, half seriously, "You could at least bow. I just saved your whole team." And Rex, with the specific genius of a dog who understood far more than he was given credit for, had lowered his head. She'd trained it into him properly after that, as a ritual, a private language. When the mission was done and everyone was back, Rex bowed to the person who had brought them home. He'd done it every time since, for 3 years of operations. He hadn't done it since she'd disappeared. He was doing it now. The sound in the corridor was the sound of a room losing oxygen. That particular collective stillness of people who are processing something that doesn't fit the category they'd assigned it. Wilson looked at Maya across the space between them. Something moved through his expression that he didn't try to conceal. Relief, and something older than relief. The specific emotion of a commanding officer who has been searching for someone and has finally found them somewhere unexpected and intact. "Dr. Chun," he said. The security guard stopped moving. Blackwell said, "What?" and then stopped, because that syllable was as far as language was carrying him right now. Captain Derek Wilson. Wilson produced credentials with the economy of someone who has shown credentials in hostile environments and knows exactly how long to hold them open. Special Operations Command, Black Division. He glanced at Rex, who hadn't moved, who was still in his posture of recognition at Maya's feet. "Before anyone questions whether I've identified the right person, I trust my dog's judgment over almost anything else in this building. Maya looked at Rex for a long moment. Something passed through her face. Not emotion exactly, but the trace of something that had been stored for a very long time. She crouched down, put her hand on the side of his head, and said something to him in a voice too quiet for the corridor to hear. Rex's tail moved. Once. Twice. The controlled, dignified tail movement of a working dog acknowledging a reunion. Maya stood up. "Hey, Captain," she said. Wilson's mouth moved. It was, possibly, a smile, the kind of smile that appears on faces that have mostly forgotten how to make them. "You're a hard person to find, document." That was the idea. She turned to look at Blackwell. His face had undergone several transformations in the past 40 seconds and had currently settled on the expression of a man who has been certain for so long that he has lost the machinery for recalibration. What is this?" he said. "What is happening?" Wilson looked at him for a moment with the particular assessment of someone deciding how much time an individual is worth. "Your janitor," he said, "is Dr. Maya Chun, Senior Medical Officer, Sockham Black Division. She holds 2 medical doctorates, surgery and emergency medicine, both completed before the age of 24. She has performed over 300 documented field surgeries, including 47 cardiac procedures under conditions that most surgical theaters couldn't replicate in simulation. She is the lead-authored researcher on 2 classified papers on trauma surgery protocols that have since been adapted into standard SOC medical training. She holds the Distinguished Service Cross." He paused. "I'll stop there because the rest is classified, but I think you have a sufficient picture." The corridor was very quiet. Dr. Park, who was standing to Maya's left, looked at her with an expression that was, of all the expressions in the corridor, the most difficult to categorize. It wasn't surprise exactly. It was the expression of someone who had suspected that they were seeing something unusual and was now receiving confirmation of the full dimensions of what that unusual thing actually was. He looked at her for a long moment, and she didn't look back at him, and the moment passed. "She still doesn't have a state license to practice medicine," Blackwell said. Even he seemed to hear, from the inside, how small that sentence was. "She holds a federal emergency medical authorization," Wilson said, "which supersedes state licensing requirements in exigent circumstances." The authorization was filed, he checked his watch, approximately 48 minutes ago, when we were notified that a United States senator was in cardiac arrest and that the physician responsible for his initial stabilization was being asked to stop. "I was there," Emily Torres said from the edge of the group. She had her arms folded and the expression of a woman who has been in emergency medicine long enough to have a very specific relationship with righteous anger. "I was in that room for every minute of it. She talked through every decision. She knew exactly what she was doing. She saved his life." Blackwell opened his mouth, closed it. The opening and closing had the quality of a mechanism that had lost its purpose. "This is my hospital," he said. Wilson looked at him for a long, considered moment. "Not for long," he said. The man who arrived at 1:15 a.m. wore a suit that was too well made for the hour and the setting. He carried a briefcase that he didn't open in front of people. He introduced himself to Director Blackwell directly. Not to security, not to reception, which was how you knew the conversation was going to be serious. "Marcus Webb," he said. "FBI, Financial Crimes Division." He looked around the corridor with the mild, professional interest of someone who had arrived at a scene they'd been studying from a distance for some time and were now seeing in 3 dimensions. "I've been building a case involving St. Meridian General Hospital for approximately 8 months. Tonight's events accelerated our timeline." He looked at Blackwell. "I'd appreciate the use of your office." Blackwell stared at him. "What case?" Webb opened his briefcase and produced a folder that was substantial enough to serve as a mild physical hazard if dropped. "Insurance fraud, specifically, a scheme involving falsified surgical outcome reports submitted to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to maintain the hospital certification tier, generating approximately $4.2 million in additional annual reimbursements to which this institution was not entitled. Kickback arrangements with 3 pharmaceutical suppliers. And, most directly relevant to tonight, he produced a second, thinner folder, the active suppression of 2 prior malpractice cases involving Dr. Victoria Sterling. Sterling, who had been standing very quietly at the edge of the corridor for the last 20 minutes, made a small, specific sound. I'd like a lawyer, she said. That's your right, Webb said pleasantly. You'll have ample opportunity. What malpractice cases? Park said. His voice was very careful. The voice of someone who is asking a question they are afraid of the answer to. 2 patients, Webb said, in 2022 and 2024, who died following misdiagnosed cardiac events at this institution. In both cases, aortic dissection was misidentified as myocardial infarction. In both cases, anticoagulation therapy was administered, and the patients did not survive the resulting complications. He paused. In both cases, the incident reports were subsequently amended. The families were settled with under non-disclosure agreements. The cases were removed from Dr. Sterling's formal record with the State Medical Board. The documentation of these amendments exists and has been in our possession for 3 months. The corridor was completely silent. Senator Caldwell would have been the third, Park said. Yes, Webb said. Sterling looked at the floor. Her hands were very still at her sides. Her face had the quality of someone from whom something large has been taken, not dramatically, not all at once, but with the slow irreversibility of a tide going out. Blackwell's face had gone through red and was now approaching a color that Maya, with clinical detachment, noted as physiologically concerning. She made a brief private assessment of his cardiovascular risk profile and filed it in the category of not my immediate responsibility. You cannot come into my hospital, and Blackwell started. Mr. Blackwell, Webb said, with the particular gentleness of someone who does not need to raise his voice because the facts are doing all the necessary work. We've been in your hospital for 8 months. We've been quite comfortable, thank you. He looked at Maya, who was still leaning against the corridor wall with the expression of someone observing weather. Dr. Chun, he said, on behalf of the Bureau, I want to apologize for the situation tonight. Our asset coordination with SOCOM on your case was, he chose the word, suboptimal. You should have been notified earlier. Maya looked at him steadily. The people who accessed my identity on the dark web forums, she said. What is their current status? 2 are in federal custody, 1 in a foreign jurisdiction cooperating with extradition proceedings, and 1 is deceased. Webb held her gaze without flinching. The network that obtained your information has been dismantled. The threat to your personal safety has been neutralized for approximately 4 months. A specific quality entered the corridor's silence. For months, Maya said. Yes. I'm sorry you weren't notified. There were bureaucratic delays in the interagency communication process that. For months, she said again. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter and more specific. The sound of someone doing arithmetic on time they didn't have to lose, and realizing the sum is not recoverable. She looked at her mop, leaning against the wall. She looked at it for a moment with an expression that was very hard to read, if you didn't know her. If you did, if you'd been her commanding officer for 6 years, you'd have recognized it as the expression she made when she was deciding whether to say what she was actually thinking. She decided not to. Okay, she said. Wilson cleared his throat. Maya, I'm okay, she said. Dr. Park, who had been very quiet through all of this, said, You've been cleaning our floors for 3 years. Maya turned to look at him. He wasn't asking it as an accusation or a curiosity. He was saying it with the specific quality of someone placing a piece into a puzzle that has suddenly become much larger than the frame they built for it. Yes, she said. And you put notes in the suggestion box. Something moved across her face, the ghost of something that in another context might have been humor. You read them. I read them, he said. The note about Mrs. Patterson in 412. I requested a new MRI 2 days ago. The L4, L5 compression. She's starting physical therapy next week. He paused. And Lisa and Gwen in pediatrics. Still's disease, Maya said. Early presentation mimicking viral illness. The ferritin levels and the joint inflammation pattern were the key markers. The viral panel was always going to come back negative. We started her on the NSAID protocol 3 days ago, Park said. She's responding well. Her parents, he stopped for a moment. Her parents are very relieved. Maya nodded once. The notes were always anonymous, Park said. I tried to find out who was writing them. The handwriting wasn't consistent. You were changing it deliberately, weren't you? Yes. But they were always right. She said nothing. How many? He said. Over 3 years? She considered. 41, she said. Roughly. I stopped counting. He looked at her for a long time. with the expression of a man recalibrating a great deal of information simultaneously. About the hospital he worked in, about the invisible infrastructure of quiet competence that had been operating beneath his notice, about the woman in the gray uniform he had passed in the corridor every morning for 3 years without understanding what he was passing. "Okay," he said, and it was not really a response to anything she'd said, but seemed to be a response to something internal that had reached a conclusion. From the direction of the OR, a surgical resident appeared, slightly out of breath, and with the particular expression of someone who has just emerged from something significant. "Senator Caldwell's repair is complete," she said. Her voice had the careful quality of someone delivering important news in a room where important things have clearly been happening without her. "He's in recovery. Stable," the attending said. She scanned the crowd, trying to identify the relevant parties. "He said whoever performed the initial stabilization did the cleanest pericardiocentesis he's seen in 20 years of cardiac surgery. He wanted to know who to credit." The corridor looked at Maya. Maya looked at the resident. "The whole team," she said. "Credit the whole team." By 3 a.m., the hospital had the specific feeling of a place after a storm. That stillness where things are still displaced from where they belong, and the full accounting of damage hasn't been completed, but everyone knows the accounting is coming. Blackwell was in his office with Webb and 2 additional federal agents. The sound that occasionally came through the door had the quality of a man renegotiating his understanding of his own biography in real time. Sterling had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. She sat in the waiting room with a lawyer who had arrived with impressive speed and was having a sustained, hushed phone conversation in the corner. Sterling herself was quiet. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and looked at a point on the floor that wasn't visible to anyone else. Maya passed through the waiting room twice in the course of the next hour, and on the second pass, Sterling looked up. "I didn't know about the reports being falsified," she said. Her voice was stripped of everything except something raw underneath it, the specific quality of a person who has taken off a performance they've been wearing for a very long time and is not sure what is underneath. Maya looked at her steadily. "I made a mistake," Sterling said. "Both times. And I knew it. I knew it, and I let Harrison—" She stopped. She tried again. "I let it get buried. Because I was afraid. Because I thought if it came out, everything I'd built would come apart." She looked at her hands. Tonight would have been the 3rd time. Maya was quiet for a moment. "The families," she said. "The ones who signed the NDAs. They deserve to know what happened." Sterling closed her eyes. "I know," she said. "Then do that first," Maya said. "Before anything else. Before the lawyers settle anything. Before any more paperwork moves. Call them yourself." She paused. "That won't fix it. But it's the beginning of what might eventually resemble fixing it." Sterling nodded. She looked, for the first time tonight, like a person rather than a role. Maya left her to it. At 4 a.m., word came from the cardiac ICU that Senator Caldwell was awake and alert and asking to see the woman who saved my life. The Secret Service agent who delivered this message looked at Maya for a long moment before adding, with the directness of his profession, "He was told who you are." He still asked. Maya sat in the chair beside Caldwell's bed for 11 minutes. He was connected to monitors and IVs and the various tethers of serious post-surgical care, but his eyes were clear and his voice, when he used it, was the voice of a man who was present. He held her hand. She allowed this. "They tell me you're a janitor," he said. "I was," she said. "Were," he noted. He had, she noticed, the particular attentiveness of a man who has recently been very close to the end of things and is not wasting words. "Yes," she said. "Were." He looked at her. "What do you want?" he said. "Not what other people want for you. Not what the situation requires or what your duty says. What do you want, Maya-chun?" She thought about this honestly, which was something she had not done for a long time. She thought about the suggestion box. She thought about Lisa and Gwen, 9 years old, whose fever had been breaking since they'd started the right treatment, whose parents had no idea why the diagnosis had suddenly changed. She thought about Mrs. Patterson beginning physical therapy. She thought about the 41 notes, and the lives they'd touched, and the fact that she'd never been thanked for any of them, and had not needed to be. She thought about the 6 years before the gray uniform, the roar of it, the loss of it, the specific grief of watching people die in your hands in places where no one would ever know they'd lived. The weight of classified commendations that could never be spoken aloud. The excellence performed in total darkness. She thought about Dr. Park and the way he'd said I read them, with the particular quality of someone for whom information is a form of respect. She thought about Rex, who was currently in the lobby with Wilson, causing significant and apparently quite pleasant disruption to the night nursing staff. I want to be useful, she said. Visibly, not in the dark. Caldwell smiled carefully, mindful of the recent modifications to his thoracic architecture. I think, he said, we can work with that. The sun came up over Riverton at 6:17 a.m. with the indifferent consistency of things that don't know what happened during the night and don't need to. Emily Torres found Maya in the supply room on the third floor, where Maya was, out of habit or something that had not yet converted from habit into choice, reorganizing a shelf that had been put back incorrectly by someone on the night shift. You know you don't have to do that anymore, Emily said. I know. Maya placed a package back in its correct position. It was wrong, though. Emily leaned in the doorway with the particular posture of end-of-shift exhaustion, the kind that goes down past the muscles to somewhere structural. Are you going to stay? She asked. Maya considered the supply room, the hospital beyond it, the corridor she'd mopped every morning for 3 years, the suggestion box, the small, quiet ecosystem of care she'd built around herself in the spaces between invisibility. I've been offered a position, she said. Chief of Emergency Surgery, in a part-time consulting role with SOCM. She paused. Senator Caldwell made some calls at 4 in the morning. Emily absorbed this. That's 2 jobs. People have 2 things sometimes, Maya said. Sometimes more. Emily smiled. It was a tired smile, but a genuine one. Lisa and Wynn's parents came by looking for whoever put the note in the suggestion box. They wanted to thank them. She watched Maya's face. I told them it was anonymous. Maya was quiet. She's doing well, Emily said. Lisa, she's going to be okay. They caught it early enough. I know, Maya said. The early presentation is the window. After that it gets complicated. Because of you, Emily said. Maya didn't argue this. She was getting slightly, very slightly, better at not deflecting everything immediately. You were good tonight, Maya said. In the ER. You anticipated everything. The needle, the positioning, the way you read the room. You were excellent. Emily looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone receiving a specific kind of compliment for the first time. Not the routine kind, but the kind that comes from someone who knows what excellence actually requires. Thank you, she said. Wilson's voice came from the doorway. He filled it in the way he filled most spaces, with the breadth of someone who had spent a career in environments that didn't have enough room. Rex was at his heel, calm and professional and alert, ears forward. You have a meeting. Caldwell's office is sending people. The kind of people who fly through the night and arrive with very serious faces. How many serious faces? Maya said. 6 at last count. Possibly 7. One of them has a uniform with stars on it. Maya took off the rubber gloves. Looked at them for a moment, at the gray uniform, the worn texture of the gloves, the 3 years they represented. Then she folded the gloves precisely and placed them on the shelf she'd just reorganized. She straightened the front of the gray uniform. Then, because old habits, she checked the shelf once more. Everything in its correct position. She turned to the door. Rex fell into step beside her without being asked, precise and warm and present, a living reminder of who she was underneath everything she'd been performing for 3 years. Not a performance of smallness, but a performance of safety, and the safety was no longer necessary, and she was going to have to learn, again, how to take up space. Dr. James Park was in the lobby. He was still in the same scrubs from the previous shift, which meant he had not gone home, which meant he had stayed for reasons that he might or might not articulate today or in the future. He was holding 2 coffees from the vending machine on the 2nd floor, the one that everyone agreed produced something that could only charitably be described as coffee. He held one out to her. Fair warning, he said. It's genuinely terrible. Okay, she said. She took it. They walked toward the conference room at the end of the main corridor, and Rex walked between them, and the morning light came through the lobby's east-facing windows at an angle that was, Maya noted with the same objective precision she applied to everything, genuinely beautiful. The kind of light that doesn't know it's doing anything, that simply exists and illuminates whatever is in front of it. She thought this. This is the thing. Not the medals. Not the operations in unnamed places. Not the classified commendations and the unit citations and the things she could never say aloud at a dinner table. This, a corridor, a colleague, a dog, a terrible coffee, and the specific satisfaction of work done so well that the world becomes imperceptibly, undeniably better for it, one patient at a time. Behind her, in Corridor B, a new janitor would begin their shift at 7 a.m. The floors would be mopped. The supply rooms would be maintained. The ordinary, invisible work of keeping a place functional would continue, as it always did, carried by people whose names no one remembered. The suggestion box would remain. Maya had been in the building since midnight. Before she'd gone to find Wilson, before she'd sat with Caldwell, before the serious faces had begun to arrive. In the quiet hour between 5 and 6 a.m., when the hospital was at its most still, she had stopped at the suggestion box. She'd written one last note. Room 307. Patient presenting with fatigue, peripheral edema, and mild dyspnea that has been attributed to anxiety. Recommend echocardiogram to rule out early dilated cardiomyopathy. Ferritin and BNP levels would also be informative. Time sensitive. She'd folded it carefully. She'd put it in the box. It was unsigned. Some habits, she decided, were simply worth keeping. Not because she had to hide anymore, but because the work was the work, and the work didn't need her name on it to matter. It just needed to be done.